This episode of the Unredacted Podcast is brought to you by Dragon Forge Consulting. Dragon Forge provides boutique consulting services for federal and commercial clients looking to expand their business in a turbulent time. Learn more by visiting their website at www.dragon-forge.net. That's www.dragon-forge.net.
Heyo.
Welcome to Soft Week, where the drinks are plentiful, but the food is sometimes hard to come by.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Mine is very loud?
No, mine is very loud.
Yours is very loud?
I think so.
I'm not used to that. I'm
Yeah,
usually
I
very
know.
loud. This is a meeting room,
one.
so I'm trying to keep a
Right.
meeting room tone.
Yeah.
Brian, he was giving me meditation tips earlier.
Oh.
So, and I think that's important. They have a wellness room at the Westin. I should go there next and get a massage.
I'm all about the Calm app. Do you
Oh,
guys
yes.
have the Calm app? I have it read bedtime stories to me every night. Mm-hmm. So good for sleep.
Oh.
That's good to know. It's a pro tip.
Yes.
See how this works. So the challenge with this recording is that we have 2 microphones on our budget. And we have 3 speakers. So Lindy and I are sharing this microphone while you get...
You guys have to get
Trish,
closer.
You get an exclusive
All
microphone.
right. Ooh. I'm a BFD. Oh.
Hey. We can say fuck on this podcast. Yes. We do the little explicit E thing. We're allowed to do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
But I mean, it's fine. You can be as proper as you need.
Sometimes that's the right word for the right time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's very utilitarian,
Agreed.
it turns out.
I tell my kids you can only curse if you know how to do it. That's like my rule. Fortunately, none of them know how to do it well yet, but I'm like,
It's
they're always
coming.
like, what's the rule? Or is it coming? They always tell me like cursing. I was like, well, I mean, there is a context. We don't judge people, right? I mean, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. I want you to have
Yep.
good words, but some people curse really well. It's like an art form, and it does add to the conversation.
My granddaughter, God bless her, is self-censoring, and she'll be singing along with songs, and the word damn will come out, and she's like, duh! You know, she's just kind of self-censors, but
How old is she?
she's 11
Oh,
and a
okay.
half. Oh, my God, if I forget the half, I'm going to pay for it.
11
yes.
and a half.
Yes,
That
11 and a
becomes
half.
important at certain junctures.
Absolutely.
How's Soft Week going for you?
It's been great, actually. I actually walked one of our clients from one building to another, and I would say maybe every 3.5 minutes, I was seeing another person that I know from, different corners of the defense sector. And at one point, our client looked at me and said, "Do you know everyone?" And I was like, let me reflect. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of someone's, yeah.
That's a nice feeling.
It
It's a
is.
nice feeling because no, you don't know everyone, but at the right moment, you're walking around, you see some friends, Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice
Although
feeling.
last year, I have to admit, something kind of creepy happened. I was on my way to pick up my badge, and I was at a stoplight, maybe a block or 2 from the convention center, and the person at the stoplight next to me, looked at me and said, "Are you Trish Martinelli?" And I was like, it depends if I owe you money or not. He's like, "I follow you on LinkedIn. Your stuff is great." And I was like, "Oh, cool, man. High five."
And I'm looking at Lindy. I don't know if you've had this experience yet, but now our listenership is growing quite a bit. And now there are people that come up to me and say, "Oh, Brian, hey, how are you doing?" "Great." You are... They feel like they know us because we're on this and we might overshare a bit. But they know our stories.
Right.
And so now they feel like, oh, no, we have a personal relationship. You may have a relationship with the podcast,
Yeah.
but I don't really know you. Now, that's all to say, if you're listening to this, please come up to us and say hi.
Yes,
We always
absolutely.
like to meet people that are listening and have feedback for us. Oh, send us your questions.
So you and Taylor Swift have that in common. Through her work, everyone feels like they own a piece of her. So you and Tay are in the same group.
I don't
It's
think
awesome.
so.
I've been referred to as the Taylor Swift of security, so I'm not opposed
I like
to
it.
that.
I like it. I can see that.
Lindsay is considerably, she doesn't like to admit this, but she's considerably more recognizable than me. And that does not make me feel jealous.
Well, at Soft Week, right? That ties into the conversation we were having before. If you were a woman at Soft Week, you were already ahead
You're
or behind,
very recognizable.
depending on the context. I mean, this is the story of my life and my career, right? Working for the Army, you know, I always thought it was a strategic advantage if you're willing to put up with the BS that also comes with it, because it is. You're already a part of a smaller pool.
Yep.
You just, you know, there's a lot of dudes here, so the dudes have to try a little harder to stand out. Versus it becomes your strategic advantage in an event, and especially if you have like a, you know, I'm blessed to be at a point in my career where I can show up as myself very much. Clothing, we've talked about this before, how I present, just get to be myself.
I do. I love it. Yeah, I was actually talking to another favorite LinkedIn superstar of mine, Scott Stalker. You may know him. I admire him so much. And I was sharing with him the advice that one of my mentors, Chris O'Donnell, has given me. And he said, look, there are going to be 3 stages in your career. First is what you know, and that will get you in the door and get you a desk. And the second is who you know, and that will give you an interview or an opportunity. And then the third stage is where the magic happens, and that is who knows you, and they will invite you into opportunities. So, you know, I think that is a really kind of cool way to look at how careers progress or how you're able to show up as your genuine self, because when people know you, they know the true representation of you, and you don't have to fit into a cookie cutter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of getting to know you, Trish, let's do a little intro for you. Let's tell our audience who you are and why you're here.
Okay, so let's start the elevator pitch on maybe the 15th floor, and we'll do it pretty quickly. So my name's Trish. I'm originally from Colorado. Joined the Army in a year in the past, and was fortunate enough to serve 21 years. Following that, I kind of did what a lot of people retiring from the military do. I started contracting with the Defense Department, and parlayed that into one of my best assignments ever, which was to serve as a contractor at the Joint IED Defeat Organization, JIDO, and was fortunate there to find my tribe and my people, and they hired me as a federal civilian. So spent some years there as a federal civilian as the deputy director for the strategy group, and I loved that because I got to see behind the curtain and walk the halls of the Pentagon with a 3-star, and it just really elevated my understanding of how the stuff gets done at the Pentagon. And then I kind of went back into my super spooky cave of the intelligence community, working at the Office of Naval Intelligence, running their maritime domain awareness. And don't ask me why they hired a soldier to do that. They just did. But then the defense innovation bug had really bitten me while I was at JIDO and pulled me back into the innovation ecosystem proper. And I became a regional director at the National Security Innovation Network. And during that same time, I became the executive director of the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing innovation in national security. And then took a slight pivot. I kind of think it's very related, but began doing industry engagement for the secretary at the Office of Small Business Programs inside the Pentagon. And loved it, absolutely loved it. You know, best kind of pivot of my recent career. And about a year and a half ago, started working for IBM, helping the intelligence community normalize data in order to do agentic AI. Now, along the way in 2020, I think like everyone, I started my own consulting service called The Difference LLC, so I am the difference maker in charge. And I help small businesses do what the Office of Small Business Programs does for a wider public, but for a very specific niche market and very, very personal and bespoke. So that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
So the JIDO no longer exists. It's changed forms
Correct.
and formats.
Right.
But let's roll back the
Yes.
clock a little bit. Tell us what was intended to do, what it
Right.
did at the time, and
Right.
what got you inspired. You got that innovation bug while you were there.
Right. So the Joint ID Defeat Organization actually started as a task force because we were being outpaced by the enemy in terms of our knowledge and understanding of how IEDs could be employed in the battle space. And obviously that's unacceptable. So the task force started, and we had 3 primary pillars of what we were looking at.
What is an IED?
It's an improvised explosive device, and it was one of the things that really incurred the most injuries on our service members during especially the early 2000s, but throughout the conflict in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And at some point, our congressional members said, enough is enough. I will not accept these, just catastrophic injuries of service members coming back to my community. Pentagon, you must do something about this. So we started off as a task force, but it just wasn't enough. And then we became our own freestanding organization with a 3-star director that reported directly to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the DSD, and had a very specific budget and a lot of latitude to develop and speed technology into the market. And what I really love about that is, look, I was an intel officer in the military. My whole world was military intelligence. But when I got in and saw what we could do to work around and kind of flex the Pentagon acquisition system to really get what was needed into the hands of the service members in a timeline that mattered, I was like, hey, this might be my calling.
That's so cool and inspiring. So we have been talking about innovation in several different episodes. The shadow of the DEF is long. We had Jesse Levin on not too long
my man.
ago.
Yeah.
We also had Tito Torres on, who is in that network, and we've had Ty Smith on the show. So now we've got yet another master innovator in front of us. Let's start from the ground. How do you define innovation?
That's one of my favorite questions, actually, because I don't think that enough people spend enough time thinking about that, and they get a little bedazzled by the technology, and they think, oh, an invisibility cloak equals innovation, which I would love, but, not there yet. But what I say innovation is something new that creates change and delivers value. But the last part is that also carries risk. Because if you just take the first 3 elements, all it is process improvement or product improvement. But innovation represents risk. So in the commercial sector, it represents risk in terms of like financial success or not. And more specifically, inside the walls of the Pentagon, a lot of times it represents reputational risk. Am I the commander, am I the leader that is going to tell the world's biggest bureaucracy, hey, something's got to change. We've got to pivot, we've got to move in a new direction, and we can't wait for normal processes. I have a vision of what we're going to do. I'm going to put my reputation and my wasta is the best word that I can come up with, but my power of position or budget, I'm going to put that behind it, and I'm going to change the game. I'm going to change the way it's done. I'm going to change the technology or the pieces that are implemented, or I'm going to bend or break rules. And the world's biggest bureaucracy does not want to hear that, but those are the elements of innovation that I think really define it, especially within the Pentagon.
I have a question. So talk to me about the innovation wars and where you stand on that, because this has been a big topic, right? The Defense Innovation Unit. Do we need individual offices and units to do that, or should we be relying on our entire government infrastructure to be innovative, and by siloing it, you actually reduce the effectiveness of the emission? I have friends on both sides of that debate, and I love to poke people, and so that's always a question I ask.
Okay, so I think the fundamental question there is, do you consider innovation a critical warfighting skill? Yes or no? So I would say yes. It is a critical warfighting skill. If you go to academia, there are schools that teach innovation, right? There are platforms that teach innovation. Sabra Horn is a prime example of that. She wrote a fantastic book called Creating Innovation Navigators, which is relevant both to the civilian sector and the military. She's brilliant. Jeff DeGraff is in this space from the University of Michigan, I do believe. Please, Jeff, don't come after me if I got your school wrong. But academically, he's framing that out. Ethan Eagle, again, another person taking an academic look at how do we create innovation. But the number one thing that I have seen that facilitates innovation within the Pentagon is top cover. And top cover is transitory. So I've written about this before. I call it the J10 concept. So if you accept, like I do, that innovation is a key warfighting skill, you create a pathway for promotion in a career-defining field. Now, does it have to be the same as infantry in our militaries? Maybe not. Maybe it's not that big. But it could be as specialized as chaplains or lawyers and just as valuable to a supported commander. So I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier. The innovation toolkit that's available to a first-time commander, usually the 03 level, is completely different than the innovation toolkit that's available to a 3-star. But what happens if you create something akin to the J10, an innovation advisor or a team that grows with scale and responsibility for commanders, is commanders begin to get the ability to divide what is an innovation problem, what's a process improvement problem, and what is a situation that just needs me to knock on the right doors to get the exception to policy that I need to move this forward. All right, so innovation as a skill begins being trained at, a company grade level, and then it grows and it expands as you get older or more advanced. So I call this the Diller effect. If you know Nate Diller, which is a hero of mine, responsible for the foundation of AFWorks. Now, I believe that Nate was a pilot. Again, don't hold me to it, Nate, if you're listening to this. But I call it the Diller effect. He created, essentially, AFWorks. He was a leading voice and visionary for innovation within the department. And then he got to a point at 06 where they said, cool story, Nate. Now you have to go back to your real job. But he didn't want to. He wanted to stay in the innovation space. He wanted to move things forward, so he left. He couldn't grow up to be the general in charge of innovation in the Air Force because there is no pathway. There's no career pathway. If I'm Trish, the federal employee, I don't have any pathway to grow up and be the Undersecretary of Innovation supporting the Secretary. And if you take it seriously, you treat it seriously. You create a pathway, and you get to do the Pentagon 3-step: mission, money, and manpower. And if you don't treat it seriously, if I can't grow up to be the general in charge of this or the undersecretary of it, it stays as an extracurricular, and that reflects the whim of the current commander, the, changing budget cycles, and the optional integration of innovation at every level. So we think sometimes that there's like this triangle of technology, procurement, and contracts, and that equals innovation in the department. It does not. So, for example, I'll talk about a project that happened at the National Security Innovation Network shortly before I arrived there. But I think this is amazing and so underreported. So there was a student team that looked at the retention of parent-age soldiers, primarily women, and looked at the policies that wrapped around parenthood somewhere in your late 20s up through, maybe 10 or 12 years. And they found through data and analysis that there were a handful of policies that were essentially forcing parents to get out, and this disproportionately hurt women. Now, why is that important? You can't unplug an 04 from a command and then just take someone day one and plug them into an 04 position. You have to grow that person up through their ranks and responsibility. If you lose someone at the 03, 04, 05 level, they are not replaceable instantly. So this student group made a series of recommendations, and this was first to the Army, but it was 12 recommendations, and they were so spot on that it fleeted up to the entire department, and the Department of Defense made an entire change around 2020, 2019 in their pregnancy and promotion policies. And long term, they are saving the Pentagon millions, high millions of dollars every single year because they are retaining people and they don't have to replace them. That's innovation, because there was a risk. There was a risk to that, and I hate to say that it was risky because it affected women more than men, but there was a risk. Somebody had to put their reputation and their wasta, their power behind that to say, no, the status quo is not acceptable. We have to change.
So many things here to unpack and talk about, but I want to ask Lindy the question to see if I understand what you're asking. You're talking about the tension between the different approaches to innovation in the department. So we got DIU does an approach, AFWorks does an approach, SoftWorks, here we are, Soft Week, does an approach. Is that kind of what you're talking about, like that competition cycle inside of the department?
Sort of, but also just the notion that why do we need a DIU, right? Like to be, devil's advocate, there's like, why do we need innovation units? Why do we need now, SoftWorks, although those are nonprofits, now they're funded by the government, but there's like always that competition. Does the government in and of itself need to have an agency or entity dedicated to that? Or should we just be demanding innovation across the Department of Defense writ large? Like every entity should be innovative already, right? I mean, that is the debate I've heard around this,
right?
And I feel like we see that with the budget cycle, the pendulum. So sometimes innovation is in vogue as a separate entity.
Right.
I don't think anybody's ever dumb enough to say we don't need innovation, but there's definitely debate about where we fund it, who houses it, and whose responsibility it is. Should it be coming from the private sector? Again, SoftWorks, these nonprofit entities, should we be dumping money into them and fund and allowing them to build innovation into the government? We've seen that shift, I feel like, relatively new over the past 10 years. It used to be there was this thought that the government was where we innovated because they have all the super secret squirrely stuff.
Unpopular opinion, please edit this out, but I know you won't. No, I don't think DIU should exist at all. Nope. Sorry. I don't. And if we had a recognition of innovation as a key warfighting skill and we could define it and we could grow it and expand it and mature it within each unit that is unique to their own warfighting ways of war, no, we don't need a DIU. We don't need any of the X's. I mean, look at Naval X. It folded. They have tech bridges that have morphed into a new mission and a new name set because I think that they're seeing this as, no, we don't need this to be a standalone. It needs to be part of the commander's toolkit, just like some of these other specialties are. So, for example, again, we're talking about technology, but what is one of the leading issues that we're wrestling with right now? What's at the top of the capabilities gap right now? Contested logistics. Yes, there are some technology solutions that will help us close that gap, but we're looking at logistics. Within the intelligence community, there are things that need to change radically in order to keep pace with our peer and near-peer enemies. These are things that we need to do. I don't think that the X's should exist because I think that we should recognize that innovation is a critical warfighting skill, and as such, we create a promotion pathway and career field, and it changes. When you look at cyber, for example, that came out of the Signal Corps. The Signal Corps used to be like flags and, symbols. And then it became the load set that you would put into, encrypt a radio. And now it's cyber and cybersecurity and offensive cyber and defensive cyber. That has morphed and kept pace with the times. And one might argue that that's a great example of innovation in a Napoleonic staff structure. right? So the J1 personnel, like we just talked about with the Sensen project, they need innovation all the way across the entire staff.
What I will contribute to this I love sitting here listening to the two of you go, is that I was a very heavy user of the Defense Innovation Unit when I was at DIA, and I think they're amazing people doing really amazing stuff. I think what gets under my skin is so right now, the new Undersecretary for Defense for Acquisition tracks all of the innovation centers across all the department. Okay, great. There's over 300.
Yep.
It is staggering, and that's the last time I checked. And it includes a lot of stuff that I would say is like, well, it's not really innovation. It's more of like a slush fund for I need money to do a thing. And that has a place, right? These all have a place.
Right.
But I think what I really don't like is innovation theater. You'll find these shops, and I'm going to pick on the CIA for a moment. They had one that was out in the Silicon Valley area. It was co-located with DIU and NGA and DIA. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to be the IC's Innovation Center. Yep. It was a CIA-run thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Not a single project. Not one. All they did was go talk to cool companies and say, hey, we found this cool company.
Yeah.
And especially the CIA, it was really hard because they already had InQtel.
Right.
So InQtel was the feeder for a lot of the innovation. So it's kind of like, why do we have this redundant activity? Now, for NGA and DIA, that actually is really valuable because they don't have an InQtel of their own.
Right.
But because CIA was the anchor, the whole thing got blown away. Anyway, point being is that just because you had it and it did some cool stuff doesn't necessarily make it valuable.
Correct.
Because the whole purpose is really to say, no, we have an innovation shop. Check.
Right.
It's here. Go ask them for smart ideas.
Yeah, and I think you're making my point, actually. So let's say I'm looking, and I think the last time I looked was 2024, $253 million with the asterisk that said this is going to innovation. And that will vary, right? But who in the Pentagon is responsible for sitting in front of Congress and saying, for this, $253 million investment, these are the outcomes that I can demonstrate, and these are the places where we're going to take a look at what we're doing. Valley of Death, well, that's a whole nother podcast, right? But for example, we have so many companies that get SBIR money, and then they get to phase 2, selected, not funded, okay?
And what's a SBIR?
Small Business Innovation Research Fund.
There you go. Oh, my God. So we got to make sure the audience is tracking here. The things are, we throw a lot of acronyms out.
Oh, my gosh. I know. Sometimes with acronyms, I actually don't know what they mean. I just know what the definition is.
They become...
They become the word.
Yeah. Don't you know we have to send a MIPR?
Yeah.
What is a MIPR? Oh, Military Interdepartmental Purchase Request. I do that because I'm a nerd. But that we all talk about MIPRing and MIPRs as if it's a verb and it's not a thing. So not the stump the chump thing, just so we're clear. But go ahead.
Right. No. But, so I think that Congress, who is, on a very regular basis really taking a hard look at SBIR, should be demanding that someone answers why are all these valuable technologies in SBIR Phase 2 not funded. And unfortunately what happens, because you don't have a person, one person who's the secretary of this or the commanding general of that, we don't have one person in Congress. We don't have the ability to say, here are all the SBIR Phase 2 selected, not funded. And we called this, Tree 13 over here for the Marine Corps, and that wasn't a solution for them. But over here, we're looking at, water bottle, Life Water 3X. And actually, the definition of both of these solutions match. So even though the Marine Corps couldn't fund Tree 13, the Air Force actually really needs this to, satisfy the life water capability gap. We don't have that ability. We don't have that master list. A lot of people are nibbling around the edges, and some people do it better than others. So I will say here at Soft Week that I think, of course, Special Operations and CENTCOM are actually kind of leading in that cross-pollination. But for the money that we're investing and for the potential of the technologies that we're developing, we do not have an appropriate cataloging and sharing of these solutions that really, go into impact and effect on behalf of the department.
So I'd love to talk a little bit more about innovation as like an individual entity or as an institutional one too, right? Because I feel like I could debate. I have so many thoughts now, more than I could unpack in this podcast. But you talked about your top 100 innovators list, so I want you to talk about that. And then this is kind of making me think, how do we rest in that tension between where the best innovation lives, with an individual or with an entity? I feel like as you unpack your 100 innovators list, maybe you'll have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the Difference LLC will be putting out the top 100 defense innovators difference maker list over the next few weeks and months. And I'm really excited about that because what I have done is take a look at the people that make impact. Right, so that's the kind of the second element of innovation, something new that delivers value but carries risk. So I'm really looking at people who are delivering value, and you can't just be excellent at one job with your blinders on and deliver value in the innovation space. You have to be able to network. You have to be able to articulate unspoken needs. You have to be able to recognize what an approach or a technology would represent in terms of change to satisfy that capability gap that we're talking about. You have to be a multidimensional innovator contributing to the advancement of innovation in the department to be on my list. So that is what I'm looking at, and I have found it harder than I thought. Going into it, I thought the hardest part was going to be getting 100 names. And now I'm realizing it is the ranking and who is in position number 100 that if I add someone, bumps someone off. And I'm approaching this with something that's really relevant to me because of what I've seen over the years. And I really wanted to have parity between men and women. Honestly, I could probably come up with 100 women that are really, advancing the efforts and innovation, which I think is a really unique aspect of innovation in the department. But it was really important to me for there to be 50-50 parity.
No, you go. Lindy and I are fighting over the microphone. Trish, why is that important?
Because I have been around the Defense Department since the 80s, and I've seen advancements and setbacks, and I've seen women who have not only been silenced by the environments that they're in, but who edit themselves. Because they're like, hey, I'm in a male-dominated environment. I have to play like the guys play this game. And, it's just a feeling within them that if they show up as their genuine selves, that this is not the place for them. So it was really important to me, and especially for some of the women that maybe haven't hit the spotlight, who don't have 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, who are not the VP or corporate leader title, but who are actually the people that I would call if I wanted to get the invisibility cloak into the department.
We've got to check on this invisibility cloak. I'm going to go back. I'm not joking. They were working on invisibility cloaking technology when I worked for the Army.
Well, doggone it. Once they do, I'm going to have to come up with a different example.
This is just a shout out to the Army S&T team. That was my first job at the Pentagon as a 23-year-old. Was working on this, and no joke, I loved it. I mean, this is why I love innovation. There was a team of dudes doing really weird stuff. And, of course, I was the new 23-year-olds who were like, hey, guess what? Your job is to get people to care about this guy. They were trying to get regrow fingers and regrow amputees. Like, the things that people were working on were fascinating. And, again, the government's ability at that time to pull in people who were doing innovative work and to get them to say, I mean, that's a I wish we had the patience, right? Because I think the problem is, right, that was kind of post 9/11. A lot of folks were really wanted to invest in, like, helping to improve government innovation. I think there's still folks out there, but just to have that long tail of, like, doing that is just, it's hard to sustain. But just going back, we're going to look, that's going to be in the show notes. Brian, I'm going to find out if they've found out the cloaking.
And if we can talk about it publicly.
Or it must be classified. Maybe I do. It's like, I think this is unclassified information. I pulled this public, but they were trying to figure out cloaking. But, and also to go back to actually what you were talking about and not chase a squirrel, which I like to do. I also think there are probably more women innovators in the Department of Defense than men. I think that comes down to the fact that you already probably have had to, like, bust through some glass ceilings to get there. So what are a few other glass shards in your knuckles amongst friends, right? You've already kind of fought to get somewhere. So you can go in. I felt like I've always been disproportionately the person with the crazy idea in the room. And they just like, gosh, Lindy's again. And I feel like I was generally other women who were also that. Now, to your point, you often needed an ally.
Right.
You needed a guy who was probably in a more senior role than you to help you. But you were often, and then maybe this is why getting on the list is important, you were often the voice whispering in the ear, hey, I have an idea. Let's do this. I feel like I always was surrounded by a lot of really brilliant women who were bringing innovation to the table in what they did, just by their nature.
Yeah. Actually, an interesting conversation that I was having, again, on the sidelines at the conference just today. A male colleague of mine, someone that I admire very much, has a very clear brand. You know, and he talks all the time about don't deviate from your brand. Be that thing. Be the engineer. Be the accountant. Be the contracting officer. You know, be that brand. And that is very much like he's firmly convinced to that. I, in my career, and we kind of went through some of the jobs that I've had, in my career, I've had to make something from the small pieces of what I have and make something bigger, right? So recently I kind of posted about how my diversification of career experiences is my superpower. So I don't think that, well, maybe innovation is my brand, but I'm not sure that people think about me and they're just like one word. Because, you know, when I did my TED Talk, it was about resilience and mental health. When I have done my career stuff, sometimes it was intelligence, indicators and warnings to help people understand what might happen. Or it was innovation, understanding a market need and developing a solution for a future need. Or it was industry engagement. Oh, you're a teeny tiny little company in the corner of Arizona. I know somebody in the Pentagon that needs exactly what you're doing. So it's both understanding the spoken and unspoken needs and who to connect for impact.
Squirrel. No, that's good. So you mentioned like that moment where you said somebody kind of recognized you for your content. I think that ties into be who you are.
Yes.
What is the content that you are known for, and how did you kind of develop and curate that? And like, was it trial and error? Was it no? This is who I am. What I'm gonna produce. What I want to be known for.
So and maybe this is something that comes from parenting. You see something, right? Like, hey, you're not making your bed in the morning. And what that means in a bigger life skill context. So I think the one thing that I'm most recognized for is taking something that is common to people and helping them understand how it's an uncommon and super valuable application. So recently I've been doing a series of, parenting as a grandparent, what I've learned, and how that applies to the workplace. So my last post about that, and I've got another one kind of up the sleeve. So I will give you a preview of the next up the sleeve parenting as a grandparent thing. So my granddaughter and I talk about big, heady, complex, thoughts and why it's important all the time. But she's 11 and a half, And I can't talk up here in the clouds when she's down here on the playground, right? Like, I have to know exactly what's important to her. So we were talking about friends and potential boyfriends, and I said, no, you have to know what you want as much as you know what you don't want to eat. So it was like, it was helping her to understand how to select her inner circle. And she's got all these different, aspects and concepts coming out her, like, do I have to be like this? Do I have to be like the person on YouTube? Do I have to be like the popular girl at school? All these different things. I was like, no. First of all, be very clear on what's unacceptable. Like, I don't feed you Brussels sprouts because they are unacceptable to you. So have an understanding in your mind of what behaviors or the ways that people around you feel that are unacceptable, and stay true to that. Find your North Star, as we might say to grown-ups.
I steal a phrase from Tony Robbins on that, which is, you are what you tolerate.
Yep, exactly.
So if you, and this kind of connects back to your conversation around gender, if you tolerate sexual harassment in the workforce, you are a sexual harasser. You are 100%. Enabling a behavior that shouldn't occur. So I feel very strongly about, like, that's not who I am. Right? Yeah. So if I see that happen, we're going to correct that in short order. But I do want to return to this topic about why... And we had Megan Jaffer on, and she gave an eloquent answer on this question, which was, why is it important to include women in the conversation? And we came to the consensus around, as Americans, diversity is a point of strength. Mm-hmm. It is what makes us who we are, and it makes it a good place to live. It makes it an attractive place to live. These are my opinions. But I want to get your reaction to that. Like, is diversity a strategic advantage?
Oh, 150%. And actually kind of going back to the top innovators list, this was something that I knew. Like, I put together this list. There were people that were on and people that were right on the bubble. And I was like, there have got to be people that I've overlooked or who are so, of course, that they didn't pop to the top of my mind. And I can think of one in particular. So I said, like, help me see my blind spots. And the best leaders, the best thinkers, look at, a diverse group and they say, help me see what I don't see. And I think kind of going through those 3 stages of your career, the people who really successfully graduate into that most elite class of people know who you are and invite you to opportunities, those are the people that are making the people around them feel good about working together. And people feel good about working together when their opinions are heard and valued. And for women, and I will speak, specifically to the defense environment, since I've got so many years, a number of different decades in the defense environment. This wasn't a welcoming place for women for a really long time. And I think that there are still challenges for women feeling like this is a place where I belong. So if you're not making space, you're closing space. And like you said, we are enculturated as a society in the same way. Women are exposed to the same forces and ideas that men are exposed to. So there's kind of a spectrum of making, space for women, differently abled bodies, marginally underrepresented groups or historically underrepresented groups. There is a spectrum there of, like, either you're just kind of closed or you're super open. And if you're not making the positive impact, you can take a step by step by step to making a negative impact. So listen, diversity is our strength, More opinions, the better. Leaders still have to make their own decisions, and the best leaders look for their blind spots and look for different opinions in order to make that best decision and move forward.
Boom.
No.
Lindy is speechless.
It's in a case, so we can't. It's in a holder.
It also costs us money. We don't want to break the equipment, Lindy. Yeah.
You can just go. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're putting this list together.
Yep.
This is going to be such an unfair question.
Okay.
When are we going to see it?
Okay. Well, you will see the first group. So I'm going to do the first 50, or the 50 through 100 will be released in 2 groups of 25. And then from 50 through number 1, we'll do groups of 10. And I think each of those groups will probably have honorable mentions. That's how I'm going to get out of, those few people that were on the bubble. But I'm really excited. I've looked at the top 10 list, and I'm like, yep, these are my people who I know have been in different places, done different things, but always made an impact for the better and for the positive. And people who I don't see on these lists that come out from, this publication or that publication or this corporate entity that sponsors their people on it. This is 100% organic, fortunately or unfortunately, not influenced by anyone's else perspective or experience, just mine. I've been doing this for 10 to 15 years, and I know what I know. So I'm going to put it out there, and I hope that it really shows some amazing people that have...
Is Soft Week over?
It's over.
I didn't know.
They are literally tearing down the...
I thought I had till tomorrow. The accelerator. I feel like it's ironic that in a podcast about innovation, they're currently tearing down Accelerator Alley.
Yes, Accelerator Alley is a thing of the past as of this very moment.
But we are also going to tear it down.
But not after 3:11 p.m.
3:11 is when it closes.
Yeah, innovation's over. We're done. We're so done with this. Let's tear it all down.
Way to kill innovation, Trish.
Way to
do it.
Way to go. That was the end.
Yeah.
Well, and it's kind of a fitting way to end this particular conversation, I think. Because now we're not going to have a quiet place to record anymore.
Yeah.
But, so, Trish, thank you so much for coming on.
No, my pleasure.
Spectacular stuff. And so I think we're all looking forward to seeing this list.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I'm really looking forward to sharing it, and thanks, guys, for letting me speak about what makes my heart beat, innovation, and getting it to national security just as soon as possible.
Well, and I love it. I love humanizing topics, right? So I think this was this conversation humanized the world of innovation a little bit more. And I know for people listening, reading through your list of 100 innovators, I'm all about that, like being inspired by somebody else's story. You're going to have 100 new people to reach out to connect with, to follow, to learn from their experiences, and I'm convinced that I'm sure there are a lot of unique stories and paths within that innovators list, so I can't wait for it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
I'm Lindy Kaiser.
And I'm Brian Drake.
And this has been the Unredacted Podcast.